Hey guys, tonight we're heading back to the Roman Empire. Not for gladiator games or marble-columned politics, but for something a little smellier and a lot more relaxing. You're about to spend an entire day in the sandals of a fish sauce merchant in Ostia, the bustling port town that fed Rome's belly and occasionally its nose. The salty breeze is already drifting in. Seagulls shriek over creaky masts, and somewhere, a vat of fermenting anchovies is burbling itself into profit. This isn't the glamorous life of an emperor or even a well-fed senator. It's hard work, odd smells, endless haggling, and more paperwork than you'd expect in a world without Excel. But it's yours. And oddly, it's kind of perfect. Also, you probably won't survive this job without a strong stomach. The fish guts alone would make most modern noses file for early retirement. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake before the sun, just as the gulls start screaming like sleep-deprived toddlers. The air in your small Austrian apartment is already warm, thick with brine, and the faint whisper of whatever your neighbor cooked last night. Fish, probably. But that doesn't narrow it down. You stretch your back, it cracks in 3 places as usual, and swing your legs off the cot. No mattress, of course. Just woven reeds and a folded blanket that smells faintly of vinegar and salt. You've learned not to question why. Across the room, a dented bronze mirror reflects your sleepy face, hair in a kind of triumphant disarray. You splash some cold water on your cheeks, sending rivulets down your neck. No soap today. Again, you make a mental note to trade a few amphorae for a bar next time the Gauls come down with their overpriced luxuries. Pulling on your tunic, still crusted with yesterday's brine, you grunt a little and step into your sandals. The left one's strap is fraying again. Your apprentice promised to fix it last week. You'll deal with that after your first amphora check. Outside, Ostia is only beginning to murmur. A few vendors rattle carts along cobbled alleys. Somewhere a temple bell clangs. A donkey brays like it's questioning its life choices. You nod at a baker dusted in flour, and he nods back, already slapping dough against a stone counter. Your workshop is just around the corner. A modest building with cracked plaster and the faded sign of a fish crudely painted above the door. You never had the heart to repaint it. It was your father's signature mark, drawn while thoroughly tipsy on watered-down wine. You unbolt the wooden doors, and the smell hits you like a moist, well-aimed slap. Pungent, sweet, sharp, fishy, and oddly comforting. This, dear listener, is the smell of money, or more accurately, of liquefied anchovy guts aged in sun-warmed clay jars. Inside the dim workshop, sunlight filters through lattice windows, catching dust motes and steam alike. Amphorae stand in rows, sealed with wax, labeled in your messy but distinctive script. Some are fresh batches, only a few weeks old. Others have been fermenting for months. Your high-end garum, so potent it could probably clear a forum. You lean in and pop open one lid, just a tiny crack. A sharp, vinegary aroma stings your eyes, but there it is. That deep umami scent the Roman elite can't live without. You smile. This one's nearly done. Give it another week, maybe 2. Historians still argue whether garum was truly universal or more of a luxury item. You can confirm firsthand. There's a version for every palate and every purse. You make both. The rich kind served with roasted dormice and the cheap sludge sold by the ladle to harried cooks in Subra. Your assistant, Cassian, finally stumbles in. Eyes half shut and toga twisted like a wilted scroll. He mumbles a greeting, then heads straight to the back room where more vats bubble in semi-organized chaos. You sigh and start your rounds. Each amphora is checked for leaks, mold, and, yes, evidence of rodent intrusion. Last week, you found a dead mouse lounging in one of the cheaper vats. You scooped it out, said a prayer to Mercury, and kept stirring. Waste not, want not. Over in the fermentation corner, you tap one of the ceramic lids rhythmically. This batch is special. Anchovies from Hispania, fermented with imported Alexandrian salt. You have high hopes. Unless, of course, the Alexandrian salt was cut with sand again. Wouldn't be the first time. You scribble notes on a wax tablet, then scratch your head. Something's off about the texture of that batch. Thicker than usual. Could be just the temperature, or Cassian's helpful experiments. You'll interrogate him later, gently over lunch. As the sun rises higher, its rays hit the jars just right, casting long shadows and glinting off the curved amphorae. For a moment, the room looks almost beautiful. Then Cassian drops a ladle and curses in Greek. The spell breaks. You glance down at your hands, already crusted with salt and fish oil. Your day has only just begun. There's barley mush waiting at home and a mountain of fish to argue over. You step outside again, squinting into the sun. The streets are louder now, full of traders, children, shouting vendors, and the occasional goat sprinting like it has errands to run. Better get to the market before the good fish are gone, or worse, before someone else buys them for perfume. You follow the familiar rhythm of your own footsteps as they echo along the uneven stones of Ostia's market lane, dodging the occasional mystery puddle, and, because it's always a hazard, a child with a stick and very poor aim. The salty breeze from the Tiber brushes your tunic, not enough to cool you, just enough to make you aware of how much you're already sweating. A gull wheels above you, hopeful and menacing. The market is fully alive now. Colorful awnings flutter like sails caught in a lazy breeze, shading rows of windows hawking everything from dyed tunics to suspicious cheeses. But your destination is unmistakable, marked more by scent than signage. It hits you as you turn the corner. The glorious, unmistakable stench of fresh fish and the not-so-glorious tang of things that were recently fish. You push through a knot of gabbing matrons and a scowling goat to reach your preferred fishmonger, a leathery fellow named Publius, who claims to have once harpooned a whale. You suspect it was a very large tuna, and that wine was involved. He greets you with a smile that reveals more gum than tooth. You're late. I was about to sell the good ones to that perfume woman. Ah, yes. Her again. The one trying to bottle the essence of the sea. Your rivalry is less about business and more about pride. Last week, she tried to outbid you on a barrel of half-fermented sardines. You didn't speak for a day out of sheer spite. You glance at today's offerings. Mackerel, glistening and firm. Anchovies, tiny but promising. And a heap of sea bass heads that might interest you if you were in the mood to gamble. You prod a few mackerel with a critical finger. These caught today? Publius snorts. Unless the gods drop them here overnight. You select a decent crate of anchovies and signal your apprentice, who's been trailing behind you looking suspiciously like he's asleep with his eyes open. Cassian mutely hoists the box while you continue inspecting the goods. Give me the trimmings too, you mutter. Everything. Bones, heads, guts. Making the fancy batch, are we? Publius raises an eyebrow. Nope. Trash batch. But the street cooks love it. You shrug, slap on a fancy label, and say it's Iberian. Historians still argue whether Romans genuinely loved fish sauce, or simply tolerated it because it masked the taste of nearly spoiled meat. You're inclined to think it was both. It's amazing what people will praise if it's expensive and smells exotic. You eye a small barrel marked Miscela pieces. Ah, the lucky dip. Mostly offal. Maybe some shellfish residue and the occasional bit of seaweed. You poke at it and get a squishy surprise under your nail. Half price, you say. Publius holds firm. 3/4, and I'll throw in the jellyfish. Deal! I like a challenge. Cassian groans quietly. You make a note to feed him something that isn't fish later. Maybe. You settle the tally in the traditional way. A few coins, a whispered favor for his cousin's upcoming divorce trial, and the promise not to tell the perfume merchant about his moldy eel stash. With your bounty in tow, you head back through the market. The cart creaks under the weight of salted and slimy fish bits. The wheel squeaks like it's auditioning for a tragic play. You stop briefly to buy a wedge of hard cheese, more for the smell than the taste. Cheese masks. Fish sauce like a toga covers a paunch. Not perfectly, but enough for decency. As you approach your workshop again, the sun is fully overhead. The fishy load drips gently on the cobbles, leaving a glistening trail that will confuse dogs for days. Back inside, the fermentation room hums softly. Rows of half-filled amphorae line the walls, some steaming faintly, others crusted with old brine. You add today's haul to the next batch, layering fish parts and salt like a slightly demented lasagna. The smell is something else. Thick, tangy. It wraps around your head like a damp wool blanket. You know it's working. It's that perfect point between fresh and fermented, a scent only a fish sauce maker or a desperate street vendor could love. Cassian wrinkles his nose. You ever think about switching trades? You raise an eyebrow. What? And give up all this glamour? There's a long pause as you both stare into the bubbling mess. Somewhere beneath the surface, a bubble erupts with a faint pop and a whiff of doom. Fair, he says, and goes to wash his hands in the vinegar bucket. You scrawl the new batch number into your wax tablet, next to a doodle of a fish wearing a toga. Artistic expression is important. You pause for a moment, leaning on the edge of a vat, fingers sticky with salt and pride. You've survived the fish market. You've secured your ingredients. You haven't yet screamed at Cassian or fought your rival. The day's off to a fine start. Of course, the salt traders are next, and they've been in a mood lately. The salt traders, as always, are already gathered near the warehouse by the time you arrive. They lean against amphorae with casual menace, chewing olives and speaking in the peculiar clipped slang of longshoremen who've seen too many shipments and too few bathhouses. Their tunics are stained with the fine white dust of their trade. Salt, the one ingredient even your pickiest clients never complain about. Without it, your precious garum would just be fish soup. And no one wants to smell that. You approach with your best neutral face, the one that says, I might pay fairly, or I might walk away, depending on your attitude and the grain size. Cassian trails behind you, again looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. You nudge him with your elbow. Eyes sharp! These men once sold me Himalayan salt that turned out to be crushed marble. One of the traders, a burly fellow named Naso, whose nose does, in fact, dominate most of his face, greets you with a nod. You're late, Fish King. You wince. We've discussed this nickname, and we've agreed I'm keeping it. He grins. You glance at the 3 amphorae arranged in the shadow of the warehouse wall. Their seals are intact, lids freshly waxed, and there's a faint crystalline sparkle around the rim. Always a good sign. You step closer. Pop one open and dip your fingers in. The salt is pale, dry, and coarse. It crunches between your teeth. Cassian watches with horror. You eat it? You don't? You reply, deadpan. Historians still argue whether Roman salt was a luxury or a common commodity. Truth is, it depended entirely on where you lived, who you bribed, and whether the roads were behaving. For coastal cities like Ostia, it was easier to get than good pottery. Still, good salt, truly good salt, was rare enough to demand care. Nazo hands you a wax tablet. Price went up. Libyan storms, delayed shipments, blame Neptune. You squint at the numbers. This much of a jump? What am I buying, Zeus's dandruff? He shrugs. You want it or not? You pretend to ponder, then sigh theatrically. Fine, but I want first pick next week. No marble shavings, no pebbles from Pompeii, no rare pink sand. Done. And I'll even throw in a jar of that smoked stuff from Gaul. Smells like burnt socks, but your rich clients love it. You nod and Cassian moves in to help load the jars onto the cart. One slips slightly and gives a satisfying clunk, but thankfully no cracks. You tap each amphora like a melon, not because it helps, but because it makes you look knowledgeable. Back at the workshop, the air is even thicker now with morning heat and the stink of ambition. The vats seem to welcome the salt like old friends. You start mixing immediately, layering anchovy guts, old bones, and freshly crushed salt with practiced efficiency. This batch will take a while. You will let it ferment for weeks, maybe long. You've learned patience. You didn't always have it. Your first batch, years ago, turned into something so foul even alley cats avoided it. But you kept going, tweaking the salt levels, changing the fish, praying to Neptune, and muttering curses at Venus. Eventually, you found the rhythm. Cassian watches you with a squint. How do you know how much to add? You gesture at your nose. This nose. He doesn't look convinced. Also, you add, there's a chart behind the amphora. The secret to your success isn't just your nose. It's your obsession with ratios. You've scrawled notes everywhere. Wax tablets, the backs of receipts, even on the wall near the fermentation pit. Salt to fish ratios, drying times, sun exposure schedules. Your garum may smell like death, but it's made with scientific precision. You finish sealing the new batch, then press a clay stamp into the wax lid. Your maker's mark. A fish curling around a tiny amphora. Not quite elegant, but memorable. The sun is high now, and the workshop has become a low-key sauna. Cassian opens a window grate and fans himself with a bit of parchment. Can we eat yet? Technically, yes, you say. But emotionally, number. Still, your stomach agrees. You nod toward the back room, where a slab of barley bread, a smear of cheese, and a slightly alarming pickled fig await. You split the bread, hand him half, and sit down on a crate labeled "Do Not Sell." Tastes weird. As you eat, you make mental notes. Tomorrow, you'll need to clean the smaller vats. The basil from your cousin's garden might be ready to toss into a specialty blend. And you still need to write to that senator's cook who wants a low-salt version. Good luck with that. You'd have to invent a whole new process. Or just lie. You chew slowly, eyes drifting toward the bubbling amphory. The room hums soft like a living thing. Ever wonder what the world would smell like without fish sauce? Cassian asks through a mouthful of bread. You pause, then nod. Worse. Honestly, worse. There's a pause. Then you both laugh. It's a stupid joke, but somehow it lands. After your quick meal, you roll your shoulders and stretch until something cracks in a way that's either very satisfying or mildly concerning. You brush the crumbs off your tunic, though at this point the fabric's absorbed so much brine and fish oil that breadcrumbs are the least of its crimes. Time to check the testers, you announce with a sigh, heading toward the small row of amphorae you've affectionately dubbed the stink shelf. These are your experimental brews. The misfits, the long shots, the what if we used mullet row. Ideas that struck you mid-dream or after too much cheap wine. They're a bit like children. Weird, unpredictable, some smell better than others, and every once in a while, one surprises you by not being awful. You pull the stopper from the first one, wincing slightly as the scent wafts out. Sharp, vinegary, with a definite seagull on a hot day undertone. Not quite ready. You give it a stir with the tasting stick, which is honestly just a very old spoon, and make a quick note. Add more salt. Pray. The second tester is interesting, richer, smoother, almost buttery, in a way you can't quite explain. You tilt your head. Cassian, come smell this. He leans in, sniffs, and recoils like he's been slapped. That smells like old socks boiled in wine. Exactly. You grin. That's progress. Historians still argue whether Romans flavored the garum with herbs or let nature do all the work. You're in the why not both camp. Some batches you spike with crushed bay leaves or even a twist of citrus peel if you're feeling luxurious. Others you leave completely pure. Just fish, salt, time, and hope. Today's third test jar is your risky one. eel scraps with fig vinegar and a splash of seawater. You remove the stopper, close your eyes, and inhale deeply. You immediately regret this. Cassian laughs as you stagger back, eyes watering. So, not a hit? You wheeze. Too soon to tell. Could be genius. You reseal the offending jar and label it E.L. Fiasco. The question mark is important. Just then, there's a knock at the side door. 3 quick raps and 1 long one. That pattern can only mean one person. Livia, your most loyal and most dramatic customer. She's the head cook for a senator's villa and claims to have invented 12 different garum-based sauces, all of which she's somehow named after herself. You open the door and there she is, robes billowing, eyebrows already raised. I need 3 amphorae, the dark kind, the one you made after that fire in the alley. Batch 29, you ask? The smoky one, yes. The senator's wife is hosting a poetry evening, and apparently fish sauce is the new wine. You blink. That's bold. I know, she replies flatly. But they'll eat anything if you tell them it's foreign. You admire her hustle. Cassian rushes to fetch the amphorae while you chat with Livia, who updates you on all the latest villa gossip. The senator's nephew has taken to wearing Parthian slippers. The garden boys write in love poetry to a marble statue, and someone may or may not be fermenting beets in the guest room. Don't tell anyone, she adds, lowering her voice, but I think your last batch made someone cry. In a good way, you beam with pride. Garum that causes emotions. That's the dream. She hands you a sealed scroll, payment authorization, and, knowing her, a list of demands written in 3 different inks. As she turns to leave, she pauses and gives you a long look. You know, you're not just a fish sauce merchant. Oh, you're a mood. You're still trying to figure out if that's a compliment as the door shuts behind her. Once she's gone, you haul the requested amphorae onto the delivery shelf, scribble a note to remind yourself to make another smoky batch, and wipe your hands on the apron that now resembles a war crime. Cassian plops down beside you. Why does she like the smoky one so much? Because I spilled a torch in the vat, you say. It wasn't on purpose, but she thinks it tastes like adventure. Another pause. You ever wonder if we could make a fish sauce with wine? You blink. Is that a request or a confession? But now that he said it, the wheels start turning. Wine, vinegar, fermentation. You scroll down batch 31. Try wine base in the margin of your log tablet. That's the thing with this job. The more disgusting your ingredients, the more potential they seem to have. It's alchemy, but smellier. You glance around the workshop. Amphorae stacked like sentries. The faintest squelch from the fermenting corner, a salty breeze sneaking through the window. This is your little kingdom, pungent and peculiar. You stand, stretch again, and glance at the sun's position through the slats. Afternoon's creeping in, which means it's almost time for the deliveries. And if you're unlucky, the city tax clerk. And no one escapes him smelling like roses. You try not to groan as you lift the first delivery amphora. It's one of the lighter ones, relatively speaking, but after a morning of stirring, holing, and inhaling what essentially amounts to pickled sea mist, your arms are protesting. Cassian moves to help, managing to knock over a broom and step into a puddle of fish brine in one beautifully choreographed misstep. You're like a dolphin on dry land. You mutter, "Thank you," he replies sincerely, which makes you question both his education and your mentoring. Together, you load the cart. The wheels creak under the weight of 6 amphorae, 3 for Livia's villa, 1 for a small tavern near the forum, and 2 for your pickiest client, a retired general who insists his garum be stirred precisely 13 times before sealing. He says the odd number ensures divine favor. Cassian grumbles as he tightens the cart ropes. You nod. Historians still argue whether Romans actually believed in that sort of numeric superstition or just enjoyed confusing their apprentices. You toss a worn linen cloth over the load to keep the sun from cooking it further. Nothing ruins a batch faster than midday heat. turning it prematurely sour, as if garum needed any help smelling like a wet toga left in a cellar. You set off down the street with Cassian leading the donkey who's named Cicero, not after the orator, but because he kicks a lot and thinks highly of himself. Ostia's streets are the usual charming chaos. Children dart between stalls, shouting about dates and raisins. A goat briefly escapes someone's courtyard and sprints past with alarming speed, trailing bits of laundry on its horns. Two vendors argue over who has the freshest oysters, which is bold considering they're shouting in 30-degree heat. The fish sauce sloshes softly behind. Each sway of the cart a tiny reminder of just how explosive a spill would be. You once saw a delivery cart tip over on the main road. The amphora shattered. The smell lingered for 3 days. Birds avoided the areas. Even the rats moved out. Maybe we should deliver by night, Cassian suggests, wiping sweat from his brow. Sure, you nod. Because sneaking through the forum with a cart full of mystery jars definitely won't get us arrested. Your first stop is the senator's villa, or more accurately, the back entrance. No one wants garum being carried past marble fountains and silk cushions. The cook, thankfully, is ready. Livia's left instructions, and her assistant hands you a small pouch of coins and a folded note that reads, "Next batch, less salty, more romance." Does that mean anything to you? The assistant asks. No, you say. And that's exactly how she wants it. Back to the cart. Cicero brays and tries to eat a passing fern. Second stop, the tavern. You've been supplying them for months, mostly because the owner claims your garum is the only thing that gives his lentil stew emotional depth. He greets you with the usual pat on the back and a joke about fishy business. You pretend to laugh because he pays on time. Inside the tavern, the air smells like yesterday's wine and ambition. A group of travelers are playing dice. You hear one of them say, "I swore the wine in Hispania doesn't even stain your teeth." Cassian rolled his eyes. They say that every week. Back to the cart again. Just one stop left. You brace yourself. The general's house is quiet. Always is. No music, no laughing servants, just a lot of walls and a suspicious number of bird cages. You knock 3 times. The door opens precisely halfway. The steward eyes you like you're an overdue tax scroll. He's sleeping. Leave it. You gently place the 2 amphorae on the mat, adjusting their angle slightly. Make sure he knows it was stirred 13 times. The steward doesn't blink. It wasn't. You grin. Tell him it was. Back in the street, you and Cassian begin the slow trudge back toward the workshop, now lighter by several gallons of fermented liquid, but heavier with sweat, and the knowledge that you'll have to refill all those jars by week's end. I don't get it, Cassian says. Why do they want it if they hate the smell? You think about it. The prestige, the tradition, the idea that consuming something so challenging must mean you're sophisticated. It's the same reason senators wear wool togas in the summer, you reply. Suffering is fashionable. You pass a group of students reciting Virgil and smelling like fear and ink. An old woman selling garlands winks at you and offers a sprig of rosemary. You tuck it behind your ear for flair. By the time you return to the workshop, the sun is halfway down and the air is thick with possibility and flies. Cassian starts unloading while you check the vats. The fermentation process is ticking along nicely. A few bubbles, no unexpected colors, no visible hauntings. You breathe in. It's awful. It's perfect. Your neighbor sticks his head through the side window. Did you know? He says cheerfully, that Emperor Tiberius used to have a favorite garum maker, supposedly refused to eat without it. You nod. Yes, and his enemies called it fishy favoritism. He groans. That was terrible. You smile. Welcome to my brand. As the sun dips lower, You light a small oil lamp, sending flickering shadows across the clay walls and gently steaming jars. Tomorrow will be another day of salt and fish and mystery herbs. Another day of trying to make something disgusting taste divine. But for now, you sit back, sip a cup of watered wine, and bask in the strange, briny empire you've built. Evening in Ostia doesn't bring much relief from the heat, but it does shift the mood. The sounds of labor give way to music and laughter, interrupted only by the occasional shouting match over dyes or someone's missing sandal. The street lamps, small bowls of oil on iron hooks, flicker to life, their glow softening the rough edges of the day. You sit just outside the workshop door, balancing on your favorite stool, which is technically broken but familiar. Cassian, never one to waste energy, is sprawled like a melted amphora on a pile of sacks. So, he says without lifting his head, are we rich yet? Only in scent, you reply. You sip your wine, watching people pass by. A butcher's apprentice, still speckled with what you hope is just blood, hustles toward the forum. A fruit vendor sings something bawdy in Greek. A cat with a suspiciously plump belly pads down the alley, looking smug. This is your favorite time of day. Not just because deliveries are done and no one's asking whether eel sauce counts as divine revelation, but because it's when ideas happen. Good ones sometimes, or at least weird ones. You glance back into the workshop at the rows of sealed jars, some labeled with boring practical things like mackerel, spring blend. Others bear more emotional tags. Hopeful experiment, disaster avoidance, do not taste without witness. Historians still argue whether fish sauce merchants worked solo or in large operations. Some claim they were factories with dozens of workers, each one responsible for a stage of the process. You like to think the truth's somewhere in between. Some merchants chasing volume, others chasing the perfect taste. You're in the second camp. Cassian, if given the choice, would chase nap time. So what's next? He asks. You rub your chin. I want to try anchovy scraps with date syrup. He makes a face. Why? Because no one's stupid enough to try it. Yet, you head back inside and start cleaning your tasting tools. This part of the job isn't glamorous. Rinsing sticks, scraping dried paste from clay rims, muttering to yourself about ratios, but it's necessary. Besides, it gives your hands something to do while your brain churns. As you scrub, you hear a knock. Again, you open the door, half expecting Livia to demand more romance. But it's someone else. A young woman in travel-worn clothes and a look of exhausted optimism. Are you the one who sells garum? She asks. You blink. Either that or I smell like this for fun. She laughs. A genuine one, which is rare after sundown. My name's Marcia, she says. I just arrived from Carthagonova. My father was in the trade, fish sauce, but he passed last winter. Your tone softens. Sorry to hear that. He taught me everything, she adds quickly. I've brought samples. She gestures to a small sack over her shoulder. You catch a whiff. It's strong, but layered. More nutty than your blends. A different kind of fermentation. She sets down a small flask, pulls the stopper, and hands it over. You dip your finger, taste cautiously, and pause. It's excellent. Saltier than yours. A deeper umami. Maybe a touch of smoked olive. You blink. This is actually impressive. She grins. We use terracotta vats lined with fig sap. It changes the texture. Cassian peeks over your shoulder, sniffs, and nods with a slow theatrical approval. Ever considered setting up shop here? You ask. She hesitates. I don't have capital or clients. Just this. You glance at your shelves, at the odd jars, the questionable experiments, the half-scribbled batch notes, then back at her. I have a spare corner, a few empty jars. We could co-ferment. Is that a euphemism? She deadpans. You laugh. Only if you're very into pickled fish. You help her bring in her small bundle of supplies. Clay stirrers, a few jars, a broken ladle, the basics. She takes to the space like she's been here forever, rolling up her sleeves and eyeing your storage like it's a personal challenge. You're struck by the moment. Something about passing on the craft. It smells, it's chaos, it's magic in jars, feels right. Ancient, even. There's a moment of quiet as the three of you tidy up. Cassian hums a tune. Marcia hums along. You're not sure what it is. Something provincial, maybe. But it fits. Outside, the street lamps flicker. Someone's playing a flute badly nearby. A couple argues gently about a missing sandal. You refill your cup. Hand one to Marcia. Even Cassian gets a splash. To fermented futures, you say. To stinky success, she replies. To a job that smells worse than it pays, Cassian adds. You all drink. The evening settles in like a soft cloak. Somewhere in the workshop, a jar pops. Just a little gas escaping from a fermenting batch. The sound is familiar, reassuring. You yawn, not from boredom, but from the deep, salty satisfaction of a day survived. Tomorrow will bring more fish, more experiments, more questionable decisions involving anchovies. But for tonight, you have company and garum and just enough wine. Not a bad way to end a day. You sleep the way only a fish sauce merchant can. Nose half numb, dreams flavored with vinegar and olives, ears alert for the sound of bubbling jars in the night. Nothing dramatic happens. No explosions, no mysterious fermenting disasters. Just the rhythmic pulse of Ostia outside your window and the occasional snore from Cassian echoing faintly from the storeroom floor. At first light, you're up, not because you're a morning person, but because Garam doesn't care about your sleep cycle. The sun hasn't even cleared the eastern rooftops when the vats start to sing. That low, gassy burble that means another day's fermentation is off to a pungent start. Marsha's already awake. She's outside, hair tied back, consulting a small wax tablet where she's sketched out something that may be a batch log or a fish-themed poem. It's too early to ask. Morning, she says. One of your jars hissed at me. That means it likes you, you reply, rubbing sleep from your eyes. Or it's considering a coup. You both share a smile. Then drift naturally into the day's routine. She checks on her starter jars. You stir the main vats, and Cassian is still under a sack, muttering about being attacked by ghost eels. This morning's first job is salt testing. You dip a small ladle into one of the mackerel batches, scoop up the brine, and let it run between your fingers. It's thicker than it should be. Slightly off color too, more green than gold. You frown. Marsha peers over. Too long in the sun. Maybe. Or maybe the salt from last week wasn't pure enough. You sniff again. Historians still argue whether Roman garum producers filtered seawater for salt or just scraped it from flats and hoped for the best. Cassian finally surfaces, hair sticking up like seaweed. Is there a way to turn this into wine? No, you say, but I respect the vision. He starts his daily sweep, removing dried fish scales from the floor, wiping spills, and rearranging amphorae into rows that make absolutely no functional sense, but make him feel useful. You and Marsha mix a new blend, anchovy base, fresh thyme, and a wild idea involving fermented barley. She raises an eyebrow. It might foam, she warns. Life's better with a little foam, you say, which sounds more poetic than you intended. As the mixture settles, you catch a glimpse of the forum's rooftop in the distance already buzzing. You've got a stall reserved this afternoon. A rare thing. Most of your garum business is bulk deliveries and special orders, but once in a while you show face. Remind people who's behind the stink. Preparing for market means samples. The small jars. The clean ones. With tight cork and wax seals and labels that read like perfume ads. Sea memory. Noble brine, morning mackerel, which sold surprisingly well last time. Do we have the green pigment for the wax seal? You ask. Cassian fishes in a sack. We have blue, and something that might have been red once. Perfect, you say. Let's pretend it's intentional. You start labeling. Marcia handles the sealing. Cassian applies ribbon with the artistic flair of a distracted gladiator. There's a knock on the door. A courier, red faced and sweating under too many layers. He hands you a tablet. The wax imprint is from the Guild of Sauces and Saltworks. You groan. They've moved the tasting competition. Again, it's now scheduled during tomorrow's midday heat because apparently melting competitors is part of the judging criteria. You show the others. Marcia looks intrigued. Cassian looks like he just swallowed a lemon. We're entering, she asks. We're winning, you reply. She doesn't argue. You load up the cart. Cassian, miraculously upright, loads the sample jars with a level of care he usually reserves for naps. Marcia packs a few new blends, her Carthago-style recipes, and adds a jar of something she's labeled secret weapon. You don't ask, it's more fun that way. Cicero the donkey is unenthusiastic but cooperative, which is all you can ask of a donkey before breakfast. The market is already humming when you arrive. Traders shouting, musicians tuning up, a baker hawking olive pastries you'll regret not buying. You set up your stall between a garland seller and a man who insists his snails cured jealousy. Your jaws gleam in the sun. Curious noses sniff cautiously from a safe distance. A few bold passers-by ask to sample. Some recoil. Others nod with solemn approval, like they've been initiated into an ancient briny secret. Does this one have mint? A young woman asks, pointing to sea memory. Only spiritually, you say. A magistrate's wife stops by. She doesn't taste anything but purchases 2 jars, probably to display as status symbols. You suppress the urge to explain which jar is slightly experimental and possibly haunted. Around midday, you hear the whisper, "Inspectors." You glance toward the forum steps. 2 men in pale robes, clipboards in hand, are tasting their way down the row of sauce vendors like culinary executioners. You watch one of them sniff a competitor's jar and quietly vomit into a cloth. Charming, Marcia says. They're getting closer. Cassian whispers. You place your best jar front and center. The blend, aged 12 weeks, stirred daily, seasoned with the salt scraped from the storm-tide pools north of town. You've never actually tasted it yourself. It's your masterpiece. You're terrified of it. The inspectors arrive. They sniff. They sample. One of them raises an eye. The other nods just once. They move on. Marcia exhales. What does that mean? I think we survived, you whisper. Back at the stall, a boy buys a jar for his grand. A sailor trades a woven bracelet for a spoonful. A local poet tells you your sauce reminds him of unspoken regrets. You count that as a win. By sundown, you're packed and tired. Cicero brays. Cassian mutters a half-coherent lullaby. Marcia hums her Carthaginian tune again. You head home. Another day fermented. Another gamble jarred. By the time you return to your little workshop on the edge of Ostia's fishy underworld, the day's heat has soaked into every wall, amphora, and clay tile. The garum vats gurgle contentedly. Your strange, stinky children. Cicero gets his well-earned nosebag. Cassian collapses into his usual sack with the flair of a retired tragic actor. You and Marcia unload the cart. The leftover jars, just a few, go back onto the shelves, quietly humming with the pride of being selected and rejected in equal measure. As you begin tallying your earnings, the day's moments replay. The inspector's raised brow, the boy's shy thank you, the poet's bizarre compliment. Moments like those won't pay rent, but they do make the garum life slightly more poetic than it has any right to be. Marcia places the secret weapon jar back on the shelf and gives you a sly look. You never asked what was in it. I figured if we survived, I didn't need to know. Lamb tripe, she says casually. Lightly smoked, aged in fig wine. You blink. Historians still argue whether that's genius or a declaration of war. She grins. I call it bold decision. Cassian groans from under his sack. Call it, I need a new job. You're halfway through reorganizing the spice shelf when your nose twitches. A high pitched sourness, subtle but insistent, tickles the edge of your attention. Oh no, you mutter. Marcia stiffens. Which jar? You both begin the ritual of the great sniff. It's an art, opening lids just enough to get a whiff without inviting an olfactory ambush. Amphora after amphora passes the test until one doesn't. It's an old jar, unlabeled, probably one of Cassian's experiments from months ago. He names them things like wet gamble and just curious. This one smells like shame and boiled cabbage. You gag slightly. Cassian, still horizontal, perks up. Ah, my masterpiece. Your mistake, you correct. Marcia sniffs and recoils. We need to bury that. Possibly with a priest. You debate whether to dump it in the alley or use it for scientific revenge on one of your competitors. Ultimately, you decide it deserves a ceremonial disposal. You carry it outside like an unwanted deity and pour it into the compost pit behind the workshop. A nearby lizard flees in terror. Back inside, Marcia is cleaning the tools. That reminds me, we need more spiced vinegar. You sigh. That means another visit to Gaius. Gaius, the vinegar merchant, is a necessary evil. His shop smells like wet socks and ancient promises. He wears a robe that's somehow always damp and insists on quoting Stoic philosophy between vinegar samples. You set off, Marcia at your side, weaving through the side streets. The air is thick with late-day haze. Somewhere nearby, someone's burning olive pits for warmth or spite. Children race by with sticks. A goat blocks an alley with the regal confidence of a senator. You reach Gaius's shop. He's already waiting. Ah, the fish-scented scholars return, he announces. Looking for the usual? You have anything aged less than 10 years but more than 10 minutes? You ask. He strokes his beard, which is possibly fake. I have something in the experimental optimism category. That sounds about right. He presents a small jar with theatrical flourish. You sniff. It's sharp, floral, with a back note of something mysterious, possibly plum, possibly regret. I'll take two, you say, because why not? You trade some silver and a jar of your simpler blend. Gaius insists it clears his sinuses. He probably uses it to pickle his feet. On the walk back, Marcia holds one of the vinegar jars like it's a holy relic. We should do a chili blend next. Bold, you say. Romans love drama. Exactly. By the time you return, the sky is gone indigo. A few stars poke through. The street lamps flicker to life again. A dog barks at its own echo. Inside, Cassian has somehow rearranged all your amphorae by shape instead of contents. Easier on the eyes, he says. Harder on the brain, you reply. You and Marcia start preparing dinner. Not much. Some bread, olives, cheese, and of course, a drizzle of the safe garum, the stuff that makes you sigh instead of gag. Dinner is quiet, peaceful. You sit on the threshold looking out at the street. A man plays a reed pipe nearby. A woman argues gently with a parrot. Someone drops a basket and curses with poetic flair. You take a sip of watered wine. So, you say, how long are you planning to stay? Marcia shrugs. A while, maybe, until I run out of ideas. That might take a lifetime. Or until Cassian finally labels his jars properly. She adds, that will take longer. Cassian raises his cup. To mystery jars. To mystery jars. You and Marcia echo. As night deepens, you light a few small oil lamps. The workshop glows, not brightly, just enough to make the jars gleam and the shadows cozy. Tomorrow, you'll stir new batches. Try that chili blend. Maybe finally clean the gutter trap. But for now, you've got good company, edible food, and just enough wine to blur the sharper edges of the day. The garum simmers softly in its vats, like the sea dreaming in clay. The next morning, the world wakes before you do. A fishmonger's bell clangs in the street, followed by a shout about eels that sounds suspiciously like a threat somewhere nearby. A vendor loudly proclaims his radishes are emotionally restorative, and inside your workshop, the garum is already whispering. You stretch, sniff, and instantly regret it. It's a pungent bouquet today. Strong notes of anchovy, overripe figs, and what might be ambition. Cashin, halfway through cleaning a vat, greets you with a simple, "Something exploded last night." Define exploded. One of the amphorae in the corner made a noise like a disappointed senator, and then cracked itself open. You groan. Was it labeled? Nope, but it had a feather stuck to the wax seal. That feels like a clue. You and Marcia investigate the wreckage. The amphora is indeed cracked, leaking its pungent secrets into the floor's mosaic. Judging by the smell, it was part of your egg fish vinegar experiment. One of those just because you can projects. Marcia kneels beside the puddle. Still better than that one time you tried goat's milk. Historians still argue whether that counts as fermentation or crime. You mop up what you can, muttering apologies to the floor. Marcia scoops some of the remaining sauce into a small test jar. Might still be good for marinade, she says, ever the optimist. Before you can protest, a loud knock rattled the door. You exchange looks. Not the kind of knock you get from customers. It's your old friend Titus, part-time trader, full-time gossip fountain, and self-appointed harbinger of news. He barges in like a man late for his own eulogy. "You're both doomed," he announces cheerfully. You blink. "Hello to you too." Titus flops into a chair, already fanning himself with your spice ledger. "Word is, the guild is cracking down. Too many amateur sauce makers popping up. They're threatening to revoke licenses." "Mine's up to date," you say, a little too quickly. "Sure it is," Titus replies, not looking convinced. "But you're not the only one on their list." Cassian frowns. "What do they even inspect for?" "Consistency, sanitation, proper labeling, and a mystical thing they call soul of the brine." Marcia snorts. "That last one sounds made up." "They all do," Titus shrugs. "But they've hired an enforcer, some elite inspector from Rome, supposed to visit unannounced." You and Marcia exchange a glance. Then you both look at Cassian, who is quietly trying to staple labels to amphora with a fish bone. "We are so doomed," you mutter. After Titus leaves, you move into emergency cleaning mode. Cassian is tasked with actually writing legible labels. You and Marcia scrub every surface with vinegar and resolve to only use slightly expired herbs. By midday, the place is transformed. It still smells like fermented fish, but now in a curated, artisanal way. You step back, hands on hips, and admire the gleaming amphorae, neatly arranged spice jars, and the fact that none of the vats are currently leaking. It's a low bar, but you've cleared it. That afternoon, a new delivery arrives. A shipment of herbs and spices from the east, brought in by a sailor friend of yours who owes you for that time you helped him cover up a barrel mishap involving too many eels. The shipment includes dried sumac, cinnamon bark, and something labeled only as dessert rain. It smells like citrus and regret. Marcia perks up immediately. "We could do an eastern blend." You nod. "Something bright. Less punch, more perfume." Cassian looks unconvinced. "Does it pair with mackerel?" "Everything pairs with mackerel." You lie confidently. The three of you begin experimenting. One blend features the sumac with aged vinegar and sea salt. Another adds a whisper of cinnamon, just enough to make someone say, "Wait, is that cinnamon?" and then doubt themselves for the rest of the day. You test small batches. You stir slowly. You hum to the sauce. Part tradition, part superstition. Somewhere, some Roman philosopher once said, "Garum absorbs mood." You're not taking chances. As the blends simmer, the air fills with a surprisingly soothing scent. For once, the inside of your workshop smells almost appealing, like a spiced breeze blowing over a well-regulated fish market. That night, you sample a bit on some barley bread. Marcia takes a bite, chews, looks thoughtful. "It's Weird, you sigh. I like it, she adds quickly. Cassian sniffs the jar. Smells like Caesar's breakfast after a bad dream. You take that as a compliment. You bottle a few test jars of the new blend. Label them with their own colored wax. Turquoise this time. Melted from that one decorative candle Cassian stole from a bathhouse. The name you scribble onto the label? Stormbrine. Will it catch on? Maybe. Will it change your fortunes? Possibly. But for tonight, it feels like enough. You store the jars on a shelf that doesn't wobble. You fixed it yourself, and yes, you're proud. Then you head to the roof. It's your secret ritual. The sky is clear. Stars scattered across the night like spilled peppercorns. You sit there, elbow to elbow with Matsia, passing a tiny amphora back and forth. Just water this time. I don't think the inspector will like Stormbrine, you admit. Matsia shrugs. That's not why we made it. Cassian yells up from below. Do you want the fire out? Did you light one? Debatable. You sigh. It's not glamorous. It's not stable. It smells bad in ways language struggles to describe. But it's your life. And when the garum simmers just right, when the jars seal with a soft click and the stars lean in close, you remember why you keep doing it. Baking flatbread from a neighbor's oven, and of course, the unmistakable perfume of fermented anchovy ambition. You wake with salt on your tongue and vinegar in your sinuses. The workshop is quiet, but not peacefully so. It's the kind of quiet that suggests something is lurking behind a shelf. Cassian is nowhere in sight. That alone is alarming. Then you spot the note. It's stuck to the door with a sardine spine. Gone to see a man about some eels. Might trade for something fun or dangerous. We'll find out. See. Marcia squints at the message, already pulling on her sandals. Either we'll get exotic spices or a sea monster in a bucket. Possibly both, you mutter. You try to ignore the creeping unease that Cassian, left unsupervised, could end up exchanging 2 prime jars of garum for a singing clam. You've got more pressing concerns. The Inspector Titus warned you about could arrive today. Or not. Or maybe they already did, in disguise, posing as a clueless customer who smelled a sample jar and nodded ominously. Historians still argue whether Roman inspectors preferred stealth or drama. You're hoping for stealth, honestly. It gives you a chance to apologize before anyone faints. You and Marcia do a second sweep of the shop. Every amphora now bears a label. You even resisted the urge to name them after Roman emperors. Although one jar labeled Tiberius Regret still hides behind the salt barrel. Then a shadow darkens your doorway. She's tall, sharp-eyed, wearing official robes with the Imperial Guild seal stamped on her shoulder like a threat wrapped in leather. Her scrolls are bound in crimson cord, which is never a good sign. Fish sauce merchant? Yes, you say, adding a smile that hopefully translates to, please don't destroy me. I'm Guild Inspector Minutia. I'm here to evaluate your production site and assess your adherence to Roman standards of trade and fermentation law, section 6 through 13, with supplemental subsections regarding olfactory sanitation. A beat of silence. Then Matsia, ever your diplomatic wing person, says, we just cleaned. Minutia nods, poker-faced. Let's begin. The inspection is less a walkthrough and more a performance review conducted by a basilisk. Minutia sniffs every jar with the precision of a wine critic and the judgment of a disappointed aunt. She checks the consistency of your thickest batch. She taps the vats. She reads your labels. Aloud. Stormbrine, she says, arching one eyebrow. Whimsical. Is it regional? It's experimental, you say. She tastes it. Not a drop, just a dab to her tongue. You swear the room holds its breath. She says nothing. Moves on. She sniffs Tiberius's regret. Blinks. Marks something on her scroll. Marcia whispers, Vicar doomed. The inspection continues into the back room. Your modest ingredient storage, complete with sealed clay containers, hanging bundles of herbs, and that one barrel you're still afraid to open. Minutia peers inside the storeroom. What's in that? You glance at the barrel. We don't know anymore. She makes a note. Then comes the questioning. How long is your fermentation cycle? 4 months minimum, unless it's winter. What's your salt to fish ratio? By volume, roughly 1 to 5. How do you determine readiness? Scent, viscosity, color, and the vibrations of the amphorae. She blinks. Vibrations? Metaphorical. Martial eyes. Finally, Minutia steps back, rolls up her scroll. Your sanitation is acceptable. Your labeling, barely. Your creativity is excessive. You wince. Is that a problem? She pauses, looks you dead in the eyes. It's a warning! Be careful where you sell that cinnamon blend. Eastern spices confuse the market. But your craftsmanship is evident. Then, without another word, she leaves. You and Marcia slump against a shelf in synchronized relief. We lived, she breathes. You nod. I didn't even cry. The door creaks open again. You brace for Minutia's dramatic return. But it's Cassian, and he's carrying a bird cage. What is that? You ask. New trade deal. A man by the docks gave me this in exchange for a storm brine sampler. Inside the cage sits a plump, grumpy-looking parrot. It glares at you with the soul of a gladiator. It can talk, Cassian says proudly. The bird squawks. Fish crimes! Marcia dissolves into laughter. You pinch the bridge of your nose. Why would a parrot know that phrase? Cassian grins. He's been around. The parrot coughs, then squawks again. Gaius has foot rot! You make a mental note to avoid Gaius's vinegar shop for a while. Still, the bird is oddly charming. You hang the cage in a sunny spot near the window where it can judge passers-by. It immediately begins humming. Off-key, but enthusiastic. As the sun dips low again, you light a small oil lamp and uncork a fresh batch of sauce. The day has been absurd, exhausting, and slightly alarming. But you passed inspection, acquired a sentient parrot. Nobody fainted from the cinnamon blend. It's the little victories. Marcia settles in with a ledger. Cassian tries to teach the parrot new words. Brine genius. And you sit quietly, watching the jars glow in the lamplight, warm and golden like bottled memories. You wonder if Minutia liked the sauce but wasn't allowed to say. Maybe one day in some posh Roman banquet, someone will dip a crust of bread into storm brine and ask, where did this come from? And someone else will whisper, there's a little shop in Ostia. You sleep better than usual that night. Not just because the inspector didn't declare your operation a public menace, but because there's something deeply soothing about knowing you're allowed to keep making things that smell objectively bad but taste oddly divine. At dawn, you're already stirring a vat, elbow deep in anchovy dreams and coarse salt, when the parrot belts out its new favorite phrase, storm wine, baby. Cassian beams. He's basically marketing, technically illegal. You reply, not even bothering to look up. Marcia enters with a stack of orders and 2 crusty loaves wrapped in linen. Good news, she announces. A senator's kitchen staff placed a repeat order. 3 jars of the cinnamon blend, one of Tiberius' regret, and a sample of the spiced eel paste. You blink. We have a spiced eel paste? You do now, she replies, handing you a small sealed jar with a wax top and a label that just says, maybe don't. You chuckle, but there's genuine pride in your chest. The repeat order means something's working. You're not just peddling jars of fermented chaos anymore. You've got a niche, a flavor profile, a legacy perhaps. But success in Rome is a slippery thing. And like a wet fish on a marble countertop, it tends to escape your grip just when you think you've got it. Enter Lucilla. She bursts through the door like she owns the place, which, legally, she doesn't. But spiritually, she might. She's an independent merchant, a salt dealer, and your longest-running frenemy. You once described her as part basilisk, part business genius, and possibly part seagull. Today she's holding an amphora and wearing an expression that can only be described as triumphant. You've been using my salt, she declares. You glance at Matsia. I thought we agreed not to. We ran out, she mutters. Lucilla slams the amphora on the counter, which means legally. You now owe me a 7% royalty on all products fermented since the 11th of the last month. Unless, of course, we renegotiate. Cassian pokes his head in. Should I get the eel paste? Not yet. You sigh. Lucilla eyes the parrot. You've added a mascot. How quaint. He insults customers, you say. Better than your signage. She opens the amphora. You wince, expecting a stench. But instead, a faint, warm scent of toasted salt and mineral sweetness escapes. This, she says, is my new batch. Harvested from the coast near Massalia, dried over thyme branches, infused with bay laurel. You take a cautious sniff. It's incredible. You want to sell me this? I want to partner. We combine this with your cinnamon blend, maybe add a citrus note. We sell it as a premium garum, high-end, exclusively for the urban elite with too much money and not enough taste buds. Marcia whistles. We could call it Imperial Reserve. Cassian grins. Or Gilded Anchovy? The parrot squawks. Snob sauce. Lucilla smirks. I like it already. You hesitate. There's real potential here. You could finally compete with the big brands, the ones with fancy amphora art and embossed wax seals. But it's Lucilla. Partnering with her is like feeding a shark and hoping it doesn't ask for dessert. Historians still argue whether Lucilla ever truly cooperated with anyone. You murmur half to yourself. Still, you reach out and take another sniff of the salt. It practically sings. Let's test it, you say. Let's test it, you say. The next few hours are a flurry of motion. Marcia drafts blend ratios on scraps of papyrus. Cassian invents label slogans like regret nothing and pungency with prestige. You and Lucilla work side by side, measuring, stirring, bickering gently about whether saffron is too much. Eventually, the first test batch is done. You sample it with a plain slice of boiled egg, your traditional taste benchmark. The flavor is astonishing. Deep, rich, a balance of salty umami and delicate spice with a faint herbal afterglow like a polite handshake from a Mediterranean breeze. You all stand in reverent silence. Then Lucilla breaks it. We're going to make so much money. You exhale, equal parts anxiety and excitement. You'll want a storefront. I already bought one. Yours. You choke. What? Kidding, she says sweetly. Mostly. Later that afternoon, you draft a sample shipment to send to a merchant in Rome. Just 5 jars of the premium blend, 1 handwritten note, and a tiny sachet of Lucilla's thyme salt for dramatic effect. You seal the parcel and hand it to a runner with strong legs and a suspiciously nice haircut. As he leaves, you feel a pang of something. Anticipation, maybe, or the creeping dread that your next chapter will involve a lot more accounting. I'm going to miss the days when our biggest problem was unlabeled fish parts, you say. Cassian appears holding 2 jars. Good news, I found more unlabeled fish parts. You stare, then laugh. Deep, honest, belly-shaking laughter. Marcia joins in. Even Lucilla smiles, which is terrifying in its own right. That night, you and Marcia walk to the harbor with a small crate of goods for a friend's tavern. The air is cool, salt-sweet, and full of music from a flute player who knows 3 notes but plays them with feeling. As you hand over the jars, you hear someone at a nearby table whisper, "That's the sauce with cinnamon, right?" You don't say anything, just smile. The parrot wasn't wrong. You're building something. The next morning greets you with the melodious scream of the parrot. Lucilla stole your liver. Cassian, brushing his teeth with a twig, nods solemnly. He's improvising. You pull on your sandals and head downstairs. Your shop smells like salt, citrus, and ambition. Lucilla's blend still simmers in the background of your mind like a chorus that refuses to end. Imperial Reserve. An absurdly fancy name for what's still essentially rotten fish, but that's Rome for you. You wrap something in silk and suddenly it's respectable. As you wipe down the counter, a small boy bursts in, carrying a scroll tied in scarlet twine. That's never a good color for scrolls. Scarlet usually means taxes, trials, or tributes. Sometimes all three. He hands it over, demands a fig, and sprints out again. You untie the scroll. It's not from a tax collector or a senator, it's from Claudia. You haven't heard from her in weeks. Claudia, your ex business partner. Half culinary genius, half absolute storm cloud. You'd split ways after she insisted on mixing garum with pomegranate wine and naming it Poseidon's Punch. The resulting batch smelled like betrayal and foot fungus. Her letter is short. I'm visiting tomorrow. Don't tidy up on my account. Also, I've perfected the sweet version. You'll want to try it. Cassian peeks over your shoulder. Do we want to try it? I'm afraid to say yes. You murmur. Too late, Marcia says. I just started prepping extra jars. Historians still argue whether Claudia's return sparked a culinary renaissance or merely an extended civil war in brine form. You spend the day preparing. More amphorae are cleaned, salt levels checked, storage jars labeled. You assign Cassian to parrot containment duty, which turns into a spirited debate between him and the bird about who's allowed to sit on the olive barrel. Marcia helps you create a flavor testing chart. It includes helpful categories like tastes like the ocean, tastes like a bad idea, and surprisingly, not illegal. That evening, Lucilla swings by, dramatically sniffing the air. She's coming back, isn't she? You nod. Tomorrow. She sighs. I'll light a candle for you. You shrug. What's the worst that could happen? The parrot answers. Exploding shellfish. The next day dawns bright and suspiciously quiet. You dress with extra care. Your best tunic, your good sandals, not the ones that squeak like an angry goose. You even oil your beard a little just in case. Cassian lays out small sample bowls. Marcia sharpens her tasting spoon. At noon, Claudia arrives. She looks exactly the same. Tall, sharp-eyed, confident like a general walking into a battle she already won. She carries 2 clay jars and an air of triumphant mischief. Miss me? She asks. Like mold, you reply dryly. She grins and hands you the jars. I present Dulcis garum, sweetened fish sauce with fig extract, honey, and a hint of mint. You open the first jar. The smell is not terrible. That's progress. She spoons some onto a slice of barley bread and hands it to you. You bite, then chew, then pause. It's not bad. Sweet, yes, but layered. The honey offsets the funk. The fig deepens it. The mint lingers gently like a cool whisper after a warm meal. Claudia watches your face with the smugness of someone who knows they've won. I'm not saying I like it, you mutter, but I don't not like it. Even Marcia, always the harshest critic, nods slowly. This could work. Maybe with lamb or over roasted chestnuts. Cassian, meanwhile, just shrugs. It tastes like dinner, and dessert had a polite argument. You and Claudia sit for hours, testing, tweaking, reminiscing. She still calls your most popular blend amphora juice, and you still tease her about the squid ink incident. But it's good to work with her again, like slipping into a pair of old sandals, worn, familiar, and still somehow covered in mystery stains. By late afternoon, she proposes a pop-up stall at the next festival. Sweet garum samples, pairing suggestions, maybe even grilled meats on skewers to dip. Street food but confusing, she says, delighted. You nod. Rome's favorite kind. Marcia starts drafting a menu. Cassian creates a sign that reads, "We swear this is edible." Claudia, as always, has her eye on the prize. "We'll be pioneers," she says. "One day, people will drizzle this on everything. Or ban it outright," you reply. She raises her cup to edible chaos. You toast, and for once the shop feels like more than a business. It's a laboratory, a theater, a battleground, and strangely, a home. That night you find yourself back by the fermentation jars, watching the moonlight catch in their glaze. The air hums with the smell of dreams distilled in salt. The parrot, half asleep, murmurs, "Fish dreams." You smile, thinking of Claudia, Lucilla, Cassian, Marcia, your odd, briny little world. There's no recipe for success in Rome, but maybe, just maybe, you're getting close. Claudia adds, "And hire a bard who only sings about snacks." You're torn. Part of you longs for the simplicity of fermentation, of just being a merchant, slinging jars, swatting flies, and cursing. The morning after Claudia's impromptu return is a strange one. You wake to the sound of sizzling oil and gentle arguing from the kitchen. A quick sniff reveals the unmistakable aroma of sweet garum, being used in ways the gods never intended. You make your way downstairs to find Cassian and Claudia deep in experimental madness. She's frying pastries. "That's a crime," you mumble. "They're garum-glazed fritters," she says cheerfully. "The future of Rome." You watch Cassian drizzle the honeyed sauce over a steaming fritter and take a bite. He pauses, blinks, nods slowly. "I hate that I like this." You sigh. "We're about one pastry away from reinventing brunch." Claudia beams. "Historians will thank me." Marcia walks in with the morning ledgers. "They'll curse you and thank you in the same breath." You glance around the shop. It's starting to feel overstuffed. With Claudia's jars, Lucila's salt samples, and the ever-growing parrot collection. Yes, it's plural now. Cassian brought home a second one named Peas. Your once humble garum corner is beginning to resemble a fish sauce-powered bazaar, which is why you're not entirely surprised when Marcus Fuscus shows up. He's the city's go-to man for permits, paperwork, and creative interpretations of zoning laws. And he smells vaguely of parchment and grapes. "I hear you're operating more like a restaurant these days," he says, eyeing the fritter-stained counter. "We're still technically a sauce merchant," you insist. "Just a flavorful one." He snorts and hands you a scroll. "Application for revised retail purpose and street food authorization," also known as "you're expanding whether you like it or not." The idea burrows into your head. A food stall, maybe a few seats. A chalkboard menu with rotating garum specials, one corner for condiments, another for jars to go. Cassian has already doodled a possible logo. A winking amphora wearing a toga. Marcia leans over. "We could hang herbs, maybe string up little amphora lights, seagulls." But the other part, the one that secretly enjoys chaos, is already planning the launch menu. Lucilla hears the news before lunch. She bursts in mid-tasting session, declares the idea wildly risky, then outlines exactly how to do it better. "I know a potter who can make custom dishware shaped like fish," she says. "It's absurd. People will love it." That afternoon, you all sketch plans in the courtyard, surrounded by open jars and parrots squabbling over a stolen olive. You discuss customer flow, signage, pricing tiers, and whether Poseidon's platter sounds too aggressive. Cassian volunteers to man the fryer. Marcia claims the menu board. Claudia insists on designing tasting flights. One sweet, one spicy, one that might be haunted. You pause mid-note and glance around. When did this happen? When did your quiet, sleepy little garum shop turn into a collective culinary fever dream? Historians still argue whether this was the beginning of the first garum cafe. You mutter. The parrot squawks. "Start a franchise!" By nightfall, the first test service is unofficially underway. A friend of Cassian's brings 3 guests. You serve tiny dishes, fried chickpeas dusted with Lucilla's thyme salt, barley porridge drizzled with spiced garum, warm dates stuffed with cheese and Claudia's sweet blend. The reaction? Silence. Then a burst of laughter. Then second helpings. One man actually tears up. "It reminds me of my grandmother's cooking," he says. "Was your grandmother Poseidon?" you ask. He shrugs. "Maybe." You clean up after they leave. Stomach full, heart fuller. Marcia hums as she scrubs the counters. Cassian mumbles something about starting with breakfast service. And Claudia's already experimenting with new dessert sauces involving pickled plums and crushed pine nuts. As you douse the lanterns, the parrots whisper incoherently in the dark. It sounds a bit like a lullaby or a warning. You step outside into the cool night, the scent of herbs and brine still clinging to your tunic. The sky above Rome is smeared with stars, the kind that make you feel both ancient and brand new. Your fingers still smell like anchovy. And for once, that feels exactly right. The next few days are a whirlwind. Sticky, salty, occasionally on fire, but undeniably exciting. Word spreads fast in Rome, especially when food is involved. A senator's cousin's niece claims to have eaten a garum glazed fig at your test stall and experienced a divine epiphany. She might have just been wine drunk, but the rumor is enough to attract curiosity. By sunrise, your alley smells like a fish sauce bakery. Claudia's fritters have become a street phenomenon. She names them Little Poseidons. You argue they should be called Tiny Regrets. Marcia splits the difference and lists them on the chalkboard menu as Neptune's buttons. Sweet, strange, excellent with tea. You never meant to start a food craze. Yet here you are, polishing amphorae and coaching Cassian on customer greetings. Try salve. Would you like to ruin your taste buds in a good way? The front of the shop becomes a mashup of old and new. The fermentation barrels still bubble away in the back, but the front counter now sports rows of sample jars, handwritten price tags, and a small pile of herbs wrapped in cloth napkins. Lucilla brings over her cousin from the theater district, an aspiring poet with an absurd feathered hat and opinions on garum as metaphor. He tries a sweet and sour blend and declares, "This is the taste of longing." Cassian whispers, "It mostly tastes like pineapple and anchovy." Still, the mood is festive. The shop's unofficial rebranding is underway, and everyone seems to want a piece of it. Even the parrots start mimicking orders. One now regularly yells, "One sweet, one strange," which becomes your unofficial slogan. But not all the attention is positive. Midweek, a pair of older fish sauce merchants shows up uninvited. They inspect your new samples with the grim intensity of senators at a crime scene. One sneers at the honey jar. The other scoffs audibly at the concept of dessert garum. "We've been fermenting fish in this city since before you were in swaddling cloths," the taller one says. "Then you should know." Claudia replies sweetly that innovation is the source of progress. They leave in a huff, muttering about regulations and tradition. You shrug it off, but a seed of doubt wriggles in like an eel under a dock. You're breaking a lot of unspoken rules. That evening, you and Claudia stand in the courtyard, sipping fig wine and watching Cassian train the parrots to chirp in unison. He's only mildly successful. "You think we're pushing too far?" you ask. Claudia squints at the moon. "You can't stir a pot without raising a few bubbles." "Historians still argue whether you invented that phrase just now," you say. She chuckles. "Maybe. But seriously, when was the last time someone was excited about garum?" You think of the faces of your newest customers, wide-eyed and eager, of Lucilla's whispered critique, equal parts envy and admiration, of Marcia carefully carving a decorative fish onto the new wooden sign for your stall. Never, you admit. At least not like this. That night you lie awake in your cot, surrounded by the soft gurgling of fermenting fish, the faint chirps of parrots dreaming of breadcrumbs, and the creak of amphora shelves expanding in the warmth. The shop is changing. You're changing. And for the first time in years, the future doesn't smell entirely of brine and bureaucracy. It smells like strange potential. Sweet, spicy, minty, maybe slightly rotten, but potential nonetheless. Just before you drift off, one of the parrots mutters, "2 jars, no regrets." You smile. It's not the worst business motto you've heard. The sun is barely up when you're pulled from sleep by shouting in the alley. Not angry shouting. Excited, hopeful, slightly impatient shouting. The kind of shouting that usually precedes a line outside a bakery or a gladiator fight. You toss on a tunic, stumble through a clutter of half-labeled jars and peek out the shutters. There's a queue, an actual line of Romans waiting for fish sauce by Neptune's armpit. You mutter. Cassian's already at the front, bleary-eyed but determined, apron tied on backward, attempting to take orders while dodging the parrots, who have decided that customer interaction is their new role in the business. One keeps yelling, "Next!" while the other insists on, "Tip your garum guy." Claudia arrives moments later, hair wild, holding a tray of freshly fried fritters with a look that says, "We've accidentally opened a religion." You scramble to catch up. By mid-morning, you've served amphora tastings, barley and garum buns, and something Lucilla called a savory custard shooter. It got mixed reviews. Somehow, through the clamor, Marsha finds a moment to hand you a folded piece of parchment. It's a letter, sealed in wax with the mark of a fish, not a fish merchant, a guild, the Consortium Pisces Romanus, the Fish Sauce Guild. You've heard of them. More rumor than reality. A shadowy network of powerful fermenters who control the highest echelons of the garum trade. They've been quiet for years, content to let the smaller merchants squabble over local markets. But now you've made a splash, and it seems the ripples have reached them. You open the letter slowly, the wax crumbling in your fingers. To the proprietor of the new sauce establishment, we observe your enterprise with interest. A representative will visit within the week. Prepare your wares. CPER. Claudia reads over your shoulder. They sound like a smug amphora cult. You glance around your chaotic, fish-scented, fritter-flinging operation. We are not exactly intimidating, you admit. Cassian chimes in, holding a smoking pan. We're not even legally a restaurant yet. Lucilla arrives just in time to offer perspective and a copy of an obscure regulation about fermented exports. They're testing you, she says. They want to see if you're serious or just street food tourists. The pressure mounts instantly. You decide to prepare a tasting menu that proves your worth, not just as a curiosity, but as innovators within an ancient tradition. Cassian chimes in, holding a smoking pan. We're not even legally a restaurant yet. Lucilla arrives just in time to offer perspective and a copy of an obscure regulation about fermented exports. They're testing you, she says. They want to see if you're serious or just street food tourists. The pressure mounts instantly. You decide to prepare a tasting menu that proves your worth, not just as a curiosity, but as innovators within an ancient tradition. Cassian and Claudia immediately begin brainstorming like possessed philosophers. You catch phrases like fermented fig foam, amphora smoked lentils, and dessert garum creme. You don't even ask. You spend the next 2 days in full prep mode. You reorganize the back room, polish every single sample jar until it gleams, and even hang a curtain to cover the corner where one of the parrots learned to relieve itself exclusively on your tax records. There's something thrilling about the pace, the urgency, the sense that you're on the cusp of something. You blend your favorite garum with Lucilla's best salts, adding in citrus rinds, rare herbs, and even an experimental barley reduction. Historians still argue whether this was culinary brilliance or pure desperation, but in the moment, it feels like art. On the morning of the expected visit, you lay out your spread on a marble slab Lucilla lent you. You even find a sprig of mint to place just so, because presentation is apparently important now. You wait and wait, and then, just after midday, they arrive. 2 men and a woman, cloaked in simple linen, carrying a sealed amphora between them like a holy relic. No names, no greetings, just nods and the careful examination of everything you've laid out. They sniff, they taste. One murmurs something in Greek, another scratches a note on parchment. They say nothing about the fritters. You watch, heart thumping, as they sample your best sauces, your riskiest blends. The pickled pear and garum mix Claudia insisted on calling liquid poetry. The barley smoke paste Cassian served in a hollowed-out olive pit. Finally, the woman nods once. She unseals their amphora and pours a small amount of an amber golden sauce into a delicate dish. It smells divine. This is our standard, she says. Compare as you will. You dip a flatbread into the sample and taste. It's exquisite, silky, briny, balanced, like the sea composed a love song and poured it over fish. You nod respectfully. That's exceptional. She raises an eyebrow. And yet, your citrus basil blend is clever? Surprising. The other man speaks for the first time. Your sweet garum. Unorthodox, but not offensive. They confer briefly, then fold the parchment and leave you with two words. Continue, cautiously. It's not exactly an endorsement, but in the world of ancient Roman condiments, it might as well be a standing ovation. You slump against a barrel, laughing quietly. We just passed our secret fish sauce trial. Claudia grins. We're legitimate now. Cassian cheers, holding a still smoking ladle. The parrots shout, "One sweet, one strange." You nod, exhausted but giddy. The shop has survived its first real test, and somewhere in the deeper, saltier halls of Roman trade, the name of your little merchant stall is starting to rise. You wake the next morning to the scent of citrus and anchovy lingering in your hair, and the sudden, dizzying realization that your tiny garum empire might actually be working. Outside, the alley hums gently, not yet bustling, but expectant, like a theater moments before the curtain rises. Cassian is already up, fussing over spice jars like there is children. Claudia is sharpening her wit along with her knives. And you're trying to remember whether you dreamed the visit from the guild or if it actually happened. It happened. You check the empty tasting amphora for proof. The recognition by the fish sauce gill, or at least their cryptic "continue cautiously," has done more than boost your morale. It's elevated your status among the other merchants. Suddenly, old competitors are offering awkward nods instead of rolled eyes. Even the grumpy vinegar vendor down the street compliments your chalkboard menu before aggressively undercutting your prices, of course. Still, you're not content to coast. Because now that the guild has sniffed around, they're likely watching from afar. And you don't want to fall back into being just another fermenter of fish bits. So you lean in. Claudia proposes a weekly flavor experiment day. Customers vote on which strange new concoction survives. Today's options: garum spiced melon cubes, date wine syrup with anchovy threads, and a dish Marcia simply calls mouth confusion. There, not all hits. One elderly senator dramatically spits out the melon and accuses you of culinary treason. But a group of visiting Iberian traders loves the sweet date combo so much they request 2 jars to take back home. You begin to see the future, not as a static stall, but as a growing name. A brand, even. Historians still argue whether branding existed in Rome the way it does now. But what else do you call your new wooden sign, carefully painted by Marcia, featuring your shop's new name, Salsamentum Novum, the new sauce? A few passers-by scoff. One scoffs so dramatically that he pulls a shoulder muscle, but others stop, read, and step inside. One curious teenager asks what makes the sauce new. You give him a sample of the mint and honey blend and tell him it's what Poseidon would drizzle on pancakes. He buys 2 jars. The more you experiment, the more creative your team becomes. Lucilla starts bottling the garum in small painted jars, hand decorated with little sea creatures. Cassian tries to infuse vinegar with crab shells. It backfires. The smell clears the back alley for 2 days. And through it all, you maintain your daily rituals. Turn in the fermentation barrels, stir in the paste jars, inspecting the amphorae for cracks and leaks. One morning, while inspecting the lowest shelf, you find a forgotten amphora, one of your earliest experiments. You open it carefully, half expecting it to hiss or bite you. Instead, it smells sublime, aged, mellowed, complex. A touch smoky, a hint of sea fennel, and none of the eye-watering sharpness of your first batches. You pour a bit into a tiny cup, taste it, and feel time collapse slightly. This is the flavor you've been chasing since the beginning. Familiar but bold, ancient yet new. You bottle it under a special label, Fermentum Primus, the first sauce. You only make 5 jars. They sell in one afternoon. Your little shop is evolving. No longer just a curiosity, but a destination. You overhear someone say they're bringing friends from the provinces to try the funny sauce place. It's not the most flattering review, but hey, traffic is traffic. You begin to attract more than just customers. A playwright stops by and offers to write a short comedy set in a garum shop. Claudia insists on playing herself. A traveling scholar asks to document your fermentation process for a treatise on the transformative power of umami. You're not sure what umami means, but it sounds expensive. Even your competitors seem grudgingly impressed. One approaches you with a proposition. Co-create a limited edition dueling sauces sampler pack. You laugh until you realize he's serious. You agree on the condition that your blend goes first alphabetically. He grumbles but accepts. The final touch? A weekly story night hosted by Cassian and one of the parrots. Guests sip diluted garum tonics while Cassian retells exaggerated tales of your early fermenting disasters. Did I mention the one where a barrel exploded and we all smelled like Poseidon's laundry for a week? It becomes wildly popular. You realize slowly that you haven't just built a shop, you've built a community. And in Rome, where life is often harsh and uncertain, and even the best laid plans can be upended by a surprise tax or an overly aggressive goose. That's something to savor. Late one night, after the stall is closed and the alley is silent, you sit on the steps and sip a mild fig wine. Claudia joins you, holding a warm fritter. Cassian leans out the window, rubbing his eyes, and offers a sleepy thumbs up. The parrots are mercifully quiet. You sigh, you smile, you burp quietly, and you realize you're happy. You don't mean to expand. It just happens. One day, a tall, soft-spoken man in a purple-trimmed toga shows up while you're restocking sardine jars. He doesn't introduce. Curious, you visit the warehouse the next day. It's surprisingly charming. Sunlight pours through high slits in the walls, warming the bricks. There's room for triple your current fermentation volume, plus a dedicated jar painting corner for Lucilla, who nearly cries with joy when she sees it. Historians still debate the exact rate of real estate inflation in first century Rome, but let's just say the rent is more optimistically priced than affordable. Still, the thought of scaling up lingers in you. That night, you lie awake in your cramped upper room bed, staring at the ceiling beams and listening to a rat argue with itself and himself. Not at first, just wanders around the shop, sniffs a few open vats, pokes the signage, and eventually lifts the lid off your most experimental sauce like he owns the place. Then he turns to you and says, "You're outgrowing this alley." You blink. "I'm sorry?" "You have potential," he continues, as if that explains everything. "But it smells like laundry and horsehair. Come see my warehouse. Trastevere, clean, river-facing." Ah, he's a landlord. Before you can object, he drops a tiny clay token into your hand, an address marker, and glides out, leaving behind the faint aroma of expensive perfume and dried fig paste. Claudia takes one look at the token and says, "It's cursed. Definitely cursed." Cassian squints at it. "Or it's opportunity. Possibly both." The rafters. You wonder, could you actually do it? Could this messy, pickled dream become a real business? You bring it up over breakfast, salted barley cakes and lukewarm turnip tea. You're still working on improving the catering. Claudia's immediate reaction. "Let's go full empire." Cassian, "Do we get uniforms?" Lucilla, "I'll need better paint." Even the parrots weigh in. Big shop, big shop. So you begin to plan. And by plan, you mean frantically try to figure out what you're doing while juggling 5 amphora orders. A surprise inspection by a food taster from the Temple of Jupiter. Don't ask, and a weird mold outbreak in your fig jar supply. You draft sketches of possible layouts in spilled wine. You ask Lucilla to design a logo. Something bold, something memorable. She comes back with a drawing of a fish reclining on a chaise lawn. It says indulgent. She insists. You almost reject it, then pause. Actually, it does. You send word to the landlord. You're interested. Then you spend the next week wrangling city permits, bribing exactly the right number of officials, not too few to raise suspicion, not too many to raise the price, and hauling heavy amphorae through crowded streets while trying not to crush any chickens. It's exhausting. It's also exhilarating. Historians still argue whether the Roman concept of startups existed as we understand them today. But if they did, this is what they looked like. A former alley stall, a team of misfits, a dangerous amount of fish sauce, and far more ambition than sense. On opening day, you host a soft launch. Invitations are hand-painted. Food samples are portioned onto little fig leaf platters. The parrots are bribed with honey to behave. The crowd trickles in. Old customers, curious merchants, one possibly drunk senator, and two of your rivals who pretend not to be impressed but take 3 helpings each. Cassian gives a tour like he's guiding foreign diplomats. Claudia flirts with a wine merchant in exchange for free amphora lids. Lucilla unveils the new label, Salsamentum Novum, luxuries of the sea. You raise a cup of diluted Posca and toast to the madness. The new space changes everything. You have room to separate the wild experiments from the classic sauces. You start organizing fermentation timelines. No more guessing whether a vat is 2 weeks old or just suspiciously warm. And for the first time, you can sit down in your shop without accidentally elbowing a fish bell. Customers begin requesting private tastings. You host your first garum pairing dinner with barley pudding surprisingly good. A scribe even offers to write about you in a city scroll called Taste Trends. Things are happening, you're growing, and you start to believe that maybe, just maybe, your little venture has the bones of something that could last. Late one evening, you find yourself alone in the quiet shop. The last rays of sunlight sliding across jars and shadows. You open one of your earliest bottles, still sealed, still sharp, and pour a drop onto a crust of bread. It's a little rough, a little too strong, but it's honest. It's where you started. You smile, and you eat it anyway. You've barely settled into the new space when a messenger arrives, wearing the unmistakable tunic of the Fish Sauce Guild. Not the friendly sort either. This one has the grim expression of someone who hasn't laughed since Augustus was a boy, and probably considers pickled olives a moral failing. He hands you a scroll sealed in dark wax, nods once, and disappears down the alley like an omen. Claudia peers over your shoulder as you unroll it. Let me guess. Cease and desist, you flavor anarchists. But it's not a warning, it's an invitation. Apparently, someone from the guild's upper ranks tasted your new smoky mackerel reserve blend at the Temple of Mercury's recent luncheon and insisted you present your methods at the upcoming Forum Salsamentary, the annual summit of Rome's most revered sauce merchants. Cassian immediately drops a ladle. Lucilla faints into a pillow of barley sacks. You sweat through your tunic. Historians still debate how formal these ancient food guild conferences were. Some argue they were simple trade fairs, while others claim they included elaborate debates, secret recipe swaps, and competitive tasting rounds. Either way, one thing's clear. You've been invited into the inner circle. The problem? You have no idea what to say. The conference is 3 days away, and your public speaking experience is mostly limited to yelling, "Don't sniff that one!" at children. So you practice. Cassian plays the role of a skeptical guild elder. "Why fish?" he demands, frowning theatrically. Claudia critiques your posture. You're standing like someone just spilled vinegar on your dignity. Even the parrots get involved, chanting fish speech, with terrifying accuracy. You polish your sandals. You oil your beard, or your eyebrows, if beardless. You rehearse your opening line 50 times until it sounds like you're welcoming guests to a mildly cursed wedding. The day arrives. The forum is held in a vaulted hall near the Aventine, thick with incense and the scent of 17 kinds of fermentation. Merchants bustle in from across the empire, some in rich dyed tunics, others in stained aprons, all of them sizing each other up with polite suspicion. You recognize a few. The Cilician trader who bottles his sauce in seashells, the Alexandrian woman whose garum has notes of cinnamon and threat. They nod to you, barely. You find your booth, set out your samples, and try not to pass out from a combination of nerves and over-fermented mullet paste. Then it's time. You step onto the little speaking platform. You describe your aging process, your mint honey variant, your decision to use local amphorae shaped like plum pears rather than the usual sleek jugs. You even pass around a few tasting spoons. There's silence. You fear the worst. Then someone coughs and claps. Just once. Then again. Then more hands join in, slow and measured, like rain on a tiled roof, and you talk. You talk about your humble beginnings, how you oversalted your first batch, how your parrot bit a priest, how a vinegar vendor once tried to duel you with a ladle. You explain your philosophy. Balance, curiosity, experimentation. That garum isn't just a condiment, it's a story. A blend of labor, ocean, sun, and time. Even the Cilician shell bottler gives a begrudging thumbs up. Afterward, a dozen merchants approach to talk. Some genuinely interested, some fishing, pun intended, for trade secrets. One offers a partnership. Another asks if your parrot can be rented for events. You leave the forum buzzing. Mentally, emotionally, and thanks to that one too strong Sardinian fish shot, chemically. Back at your shop, the team greets you like a victorious general. Cassian hands you a cake shaped like an amphora. Lucilla unveils a tiny mural. You on a dolphin, wielding a ladle like a trident. You're flattered. You're exhausted, and you're deeply, deeply relieved that no one asked about the mold incident from last month. That night, you sit under the stars with a cup of light wine and a plate of fried garum crackers, watching the city pulse and breathe around you. The skyline of tiled roofs glows faintly orange. Somewhere in the distance, someone's playing a flute badly. It's oddly comforting. You think about how far you've come. From uncertain barrels in a back alley to sharing your sauce with Rome's elite. Historians still argue whether the guild's favor actually translated into long-term success. But right now, you're not thinking about future fortunes or failures. You're thinking about tomorrow's spice delivery and whether you can finally convince Claudia to trial that pomegranate fennel blend. Because the real secret to success, you just keep stirring. You wake the next morning with a strange ache in your left calf, the scent of burnt mint in your nostrils, and a note wedged under your door that simply reads, Imperial Interest, Urgent. At this point, you're not even surprised. You take exactly 3 sips of barley brew, then march to the address scrawled beneath the message. A modest office, nestled between a candle maker and a scroll binder. A sleepy clerk in a tunic greets you with a raised eyebrow and a lazy yawn. Ah, he says, rifling through a pile of wax-sealed notices. The fish sauce person. You nod. That's me. He hands you another scroll. Report to the Palatine Kitchens by noon. They want a tasting. You blink. As in, the Palatine? He shrugs. Try not to poison anyone. Historians still argue whether food vendors ever made it into the imperial kitchens on merit alone, or if they were always pulled in by political favors and backhanded bribes. Whatever the truth, you now have 4 hours to prepare something worthy of the emperor's palate. Back at the shop, the panic sets in. Claudia throws her arms skyward. What do we wear? Cassian starts polishing amphorae like they're sacred relics. Do we bow? What if I sneeze in the soup? Lucilla grabs her pains. We'll need new labels. Something regal. Maybe a fish in a toga. You cobble together your best blends, aged sardine with olive leaf infusion, smoked anchovy with coriander, and the rare batch you steeped in pomegranate peel purely because you forgot what it was labeled and decided to pretend it was intentional. The jars are packed into soft cloth, each one wrapped like a newborn deity. The parrots are told in no uncertain terms that they are not invited. By noon, you're climbing the hill toward the Imperial District, every step echoing a little louder than the last. The Palatine kitchens are vast, echoing halls of stone and bronze, more industrial than elegant. Slaves bustle between hearths and spits, grinding spices, tending roasts, and whispering rumors. You're led to a side chamber with a long marble table and four stern-looking tasters seated at one end. A fifth chair, larger, more ornate, remains conspicuously empty. They motion for you to begin. You take a breath, open your first jar, and begin plating. Thin slices of bread, a sliver of soft cheese, a drizzle of the smoky mackerel. You serve and wait. A taster takes a bite. Another follows. The third smells the sauce, narrows their eyes, and then finally nods once. The door opens. A young man enters, not the emperor, but someone clearly close to him. He's finely dressed, draped in rich wool dyed purple, and wearing the unmistakable expression of someone who hasn't had to wait for anything in years. I heard there was fish, he says with all the enthusiasm of a bored cat. You repeat your plating, hand it over and watch. He eats, he pauses, he looks up. This doesn't taste like punishment. You're not sure what that means. You smile politely. He gestures to the jars. Leave them. I'll have my steward speak with you. And just like that, you're dismissed. You exit the Palatine kitchens unsure whether you've been praised, insulted, or drafted into the Imperial Condiment Reserve. Later that evening, a messenger arrives again. Different tunic, same serious brow, and delivers a fresh scroll. An order for 50 jars, addressed directly to the Imperial Pantry. Household of the Domus Augustana. Cassian faints. Claudia pours wine. Lucilla adds a laurel crown to your dolphin on a ladle mural. You now serve the Emperor's household, and with that honor comes paperwork. Endless, grueling paperwork. You have to record every jar's origin, seal each amphora with a wax stamp bearing your new official vendor of favorable condiments mark, and ensure delivery via licensed couriers. Apparently, if the Imperial kitchen develops indigestion, someone has to blame a spreadsheet. Still, the order elevates you. Suddenly, merchants who used to sneer at your alley stall are asking to collaborate. Spice traders offer discounts. A very nice woman from Ephesus sends you a fan letter and a sample of pickled rose petals. You're flattered. You're overwhelmed. And if you're honest, you're still slightly in shock that your accidental pomegranate sauce is now being drizzled onto imperial quail eggs. Historians still debate whether food prestige in Rome worked like modern brand endorsements or if being imperial adjacent simply meant people expected free samples. Either way, your name now appears on guest lists. And with each new jar, each strange request, can you make one that smells like thunder? You begin to realize something. You're not just making fish sauce anymore. You're making a name. You now have a tiny imperial crest carved into the side of your doorway. It's not official, exactly. Lucilla made it from wax and gold leaf after the third government courier came to collect a sauce shipment. Still, it gleams impressively in the morning light. And your customers treat it with the reverence normally reserved for temple altars or unusually attractive bakers. The shop is busier than ever. There's a line by sunrise, with everyone from grizzled centurions to perfumed poets waiting for a taste of the Emperor's blend. You've even had to hire a boy just to shout, "Please form a line and stop licking the sample spoons." Of course, success comes with additions. New suppliers, new accountants, new relatives. You didn't even know you had an uncle named Horatius, but here he is, claiming he once taught you everything you know and asking if you need help handling the Cilician shell merchants. You gently explain that you're not currently being extorted by any coarser smugglers. Meanwhile, Cassian develops a passion for logistical tables. He now carries around a wax tablet filled with symbols only he understands, muttering things like, if we stack the eels vertically, we can increase yield by 7%. Claudia starts experimenting with limited edition blends, saffron soaked sardine, juniper anchovy reduction, and something she simply labels night breeze. Lucilla designs new packaging. Gone are the plain clay amphorae. Now you've got jars shaped like fish, dolphins, even the occasional sea god, each painted with affectionate mockery and labeled in both Latin and increasingly questionable Greek. Your workshop, it's now a small empire. And speaking of empires, word arrives that a delegation from Antioch is in town. They've heard of your sauce. They want a demonstration tonight. Historians still debate how much cultural exchange happened in casual dining across the Roman provinces. But one thing's for certain. Nothing encourages diplomacy like a really good dipping sauce. You hose the visitors in your courtyard, which you frantically sweep for pigeon feathers and scroll fragments. The Antiochians arrive dressed in silks and sharp sandals, smelling faintly of cardamom and confidence. You welcome them with your best smile and your second best wine. You are going to open the best, but someone dropped it. Probably the parrots. The evening unfolds gently. You serve garum-glazed dates, salted fig rounds, and a warm barley dish spiked with anchovy brine and citrus zest. The guests nod approvingly. One even takes out a little stylus and makes notes, which you assume is a good sign. Then comes the question. Why fish? Asks one of the younger men, his eyes narrowed in that philosophical way that usually precedes a 5-hour debate. You answer honestly. Because fish are what's available. Because the sea never stops giving. Because preservation is the poetry of patience. Because the right ratio of salt to decay creates something not just edible, but divine. Because the whole process is absurd and beautiful. He nods slowly. Then he licks the last of the sauce off his fingers and asks if he can buy 5 amphorae to take home. The next day, you have orders from 3 different provinces. Cassian drafts a map of potential distribution routes. Claudia says she needs more mint. Lucilla starts painting miniature Poseidons on your corks. And you pause. For just a moment, you lean against the doorframe, squint into the sun, and listen to the hum of your shop, the laughter, the chopping, the occasional crash followed by swearing, probably Cassian again. The smell of warm oil and brine drifts upward, dancing with the dust in the golden air. You used to wonder what success would feel like. Turns out, it smells a little like aged mackerel, has paint flecks on its fingers, and keeps forgetting where it put its ledger. You smile, and then go check the eels, because one of them looks suspiciously like it's planning an escape. It's just after dawn when you hear a knock at the back gate. Not the usual tap-tap of a sleepy delivery boy or the sharp rap of an impatient grain vendor. No, this is the sort of knock that carries weight, a deliberate thunk that says, I wear armor and haven't smiled since last Saturnalia. You open the gate to find 2 Praetorian guards, flanking a small wiry man with a scroll in one hand and a smug smile in the other. Merchant of condiments? He asks. Technically, yes, you reply, already bracing for whatever absurd twist today has in store. He unfurls the scroll. By order of the Imperial Logistics Office, you are to submit samples for the fleet galleys departing for Alexandria. You blink. You want fish sauce. For sailors, the man nods. To boost morale, Claudia, who has been eavesdropping from the herb pots, whispers, do they want the night breeze batch? You shush her. The officer continues. You'll also need to submit shelf stability reports, brine ratios, and evidence that your jars can survive being thrown at deckhands during storms. Cassian appears behind you, holding a chart of humidity calculations. We've been preparing for this, he says, like he's in a spy play, and just revealed he's been undercover all along. Historians still debate whether the Roman Navy truly valued gourmet supplies or just used condiment contracts as a form of political favoritism. Either way, you're about to feed a lot of seasick oarsmen. By midday, your team has packed 20 jars into reinforced wicker crates padded with wool and wrapped in tar-drenched linen. You include notes, taste pairings, storage tips, and a polite warning that this blend may attract cats. Lucilla insists on painting a tiny trireme on each lid. It's Brandon, she says, even as she accidentally paints one of them backward. You escort the crates to the docks personally. The port is chaos. Donkeys squealing, vendors haggling, a sailor arguing with a pelican over who stole whose fish. You dodge a splatter of something orange and find the right galley, its hull slick with salt and barnacles. The ship's quartermaster eyes your crates like they might explode. You got the right brine to muck ratio? Of course. You lie confidently. He snorts, signs your receipt, and hauls the crates aboard. Just as you're about to leave, a sailor with a sun-creased face and too many rings sidles over. Is it true, he asks, that your sauce makes a man dream of olives? You shrug, only if he eats it after sundown. The sailor nods solemnly. Good. Back at the shop, things are somehow busier than when you left. Lucilla's negotiating with a perfumer from Gaul who wants to make essence of anchovy into a wearable scent. You'll smell like triumph. Cassian is arguing with a man from the Census Bureau about the official business classification for fermented marine goods. Meanwhile, Claudia hands you a scrap of parchment with a new recipe, dried sea urchin. Trust me, you don't entirely, but you try it anyway. That evening, as the sun bleeds into the sea and the shop settles into its warm, briny quiet, you allow yourself a rare indulgence. Silence. You sit on the roof, the cool clay tiles beneath you, a cup of watered wine in your hand, and a tiny dish of your latest blend beside it. Olive oil, smoked sardine, crushed pine nuts, a whisper of citrus. Below, Rome purrs. Not shouts, not howls, just the gentle hum of a city fed, bathed in sunset. You think of that sauce now sailing toward Alexandria, of sailors dipping their bread into a bit of your life, of your jars in markets far from this street, your name mispronounced by vendors under foreign stars. And for a moment, you feel a quiet joy. Then Cassian bursts onto the roof yelling, "The parrots open the vinegar again!" You sigh, back to work. You're halfway through organizing your increasingly chaotic storeroom, currently home to 47 unlabeled jars, a nest of sleeping cats, and what might be a dried eel museum when a scroll arrives. Not just any scroll. This one bears the deep red seal of the Collegium Condimenta, Rome's semi-serious, semi-secretive guild of high-ranking food producers, spice traders, and sauce artisans. Think of them as the culinary senate, but with more nut allergies and fewer togas. You pry it open with a fishbone and read. You are cordially summoned to present your wares and methods at the upcoming Forum of Taste. Your presence is mandatory. Bring sauce. Mandatory summons rarely bode well, especially when issued by a group of men who once declared date syrup too provocative for Saturnalia. Claudia reads over your shoulder. Forum of Taste. That sounds like a trap where old senators argue about cinnamon for 8 hours. She's not far off. Historians still debate the actual influence of the Collegium Condimenta. Some say they were glorified recipe clubs. Others insist they held sway over trade routes, tariffs, and the mysterious disappearance of one particularly smug honey merchant in 19 BCE. What's certain is that when they summon you, you show up. Cassian, ever the logistics enthusiast, prepares a handcart filled with your finest samples, each labeled in multiple dialects, including Etruscan, just in case. Lucilla chooses her boldest earrings and ties your hair back in what she calls your respectable fish tycoon look. The forum is held in a colonnaded hall near the Temple of Ceres. You arrive to find a gathering of the culinary elite, sniffing, swirling, and judging. There's a man presenting 12 varieties of imported cinnamon bark, a woman with a vat of blue fermented lentil paste that smells like academic debate, a bald man just silently holding up a fig. You step forward with your jars. There are raised eyebrows, murmurs. One man writes excessively rustic on his wax tablet. Then you start your pitch. You describe the fermentation process, not just the brine and bones, but the waiting, the weather watching, the stirring with care, the way a good garum isn't made so much as persuaded. You speak slowly, letting your words smell of salt, heat, patience. You hand out samples. There is silence, then crunching, then nods. Even the fig guy nods. A serious-looking woman leans forward and says, "It tastes like something an old fisherman might dream after falling asleep under a lemon tree," which is honestly the best review you've ever gotten. Later, as you sip watered wine in the courtyard and sneak olives from a side table, the collegium's scribe approaches. He clears his throat. "The board has decided," he says, pausing just long enough for drama, "to recognize your garum as sufficiently refined for public recommendation." You nearly laugh. It's the most backhanded honor Rome can offer. And still, it means you're in. Official. Accredited. Your sauce can now be sold at select festivals, elite villas, and yes, the Emperor's birthday picnic. Claudia is thrilled. "Does this mean I can finally paint tiny laurels on the jars?" "Yes." You sigh. "Yes, it does." You return home that evening to discover Cassian and Lucilla already celebrating. There's a small feast underway. Flatbread, olives, cured meats, honeyed cheese, and a brand new batch of sauce served in your fanciest bowl, which is actually a reused helmet, but no one has to know. You sit back, chewing thoughtfully. Somewhere between the bites and banter, you realize something else. This thing you built, the fish sauce, the shop, the crew, it's more than just fermented fish cuts and clever branding. It's become a kind of ritual. The boiling and stirring, the measuring and waiting, the way strangers become friends over flavor, the way every new recipe starts as a joke and ends in serious praise. It's not just commerce anymore, it's culture in a jar. And you, surprisingly, are proud of that. Even if your storage room still smells like haunted squid. The days roll by now in a strange, salty rhythm. You rise with the sun like always and greet your jars like old friends. The brine levels are stable, the fermentation is going well, and the stray cats guarding the storeroom have finally stopped fighting the amphory. The shop hums, the street sings, and every morning there's a fresh scroll shoved under the door. New orders, new markets, new requests for custom poetic labeling. Lucilla's fault. You've reached a point where people now refer to your blend in conversation. "A little more like that garum," says the senator to his cook. Or, "This stew could use some authentic flair," mutters a gall merchant gesturing toward your jars. One man even swears your sauce cured his wife's back pain, though this may have more to do with her wanting him to stop talking. You've become, against all odds, a culinary reference point. Still, not everything goes smoothly. A shipment meant for a patrician's banquet goes missing, later found in the hands of a street poet who claims it was a gift from Neptune. A barrel cracks during transit to Hispania, leaving one entire market square smelling like regret. And one jar somehow ends up in a brothel where it's being used as an aphrodisiac. You receive a thank you note that is deeply poetic and wholly unprintable. Historians still argue whether garum had ceremonial uses or was ever marketed for romantic purposes. You now fall firmly into the accidentally, probably yes, school of thought. But these hiccups aside, things are good. Cassian has developed a deep affection for sealing wax. Every document now arrives with 3 stamps and a bonus doodle of a fish. He's also trained the cats to sit in order of salinity. Don't ask how. Claudia has started infusing sauces with edible flowers for romance, she claims, though her version of romance usually includes a lot of garlic. Lucilla's murals now stretch across the inner walls of the shop. Epic scenes of fishing boats, sea monsters, and for some reason, you as a heroic garum god with a ladle. The neighbors have stopped complaining about the smell, or maybe they've just given up. One day, as you're supervising the mixing of a new batch, a young apprentice from a nearby bakery wanders in, looking sheepish. He asks if he can watch. Not to steal, not to copy, just to learn. So you let him. And when he tries to stir too quickly, you correct him gently. When he asks why you wait for the third lunar phase before sealing the lids, you explain the superstition. Half science, half tradition. When he laughs at the idea that sauce could carry meaning, you hand him a jar and say, "Go taste it in silence." He does. He nods. It feels right. You become a mentor, a reference, a kind of cultural bookmark. And yet, you still find time to sneak olives when no one's looking. That night, you walk through the city under a heavy moon, your sandals sticky with brine, your tunic stained with anchovy oil. You pass a tavern where 2 men argue about whether it's your garum or some rivals that best complements lamb. You pass a bathhouse where someone is offering garum exfoliation masks. You pass a child dragging a stick through the dust, singing the jingle Lucilla made up. When you're down, when you're low, let the fishy flavors flow. You laugh quietly. This was never the plan, but somehow this was always the path. You've built something that sticks. Not just to bread and tongues, but to memory. And it tastes like home. It's a rare day off. No scrolls under the door. No firewood deliveries. No accidental amphora explosions. Just you, your sandals, and the promise of doing absolutely nothing productive. So naturally, you end up visiting the fish market. You tell yourself it's just for leisure. A casual stroll among familiar stalls. But 20 steps in, you're already sniffing anchovies like a sommelier and calculating salt to bloat ratios on a tray of spreads. The fishmongers greet you with that peculiar brand of respect reserved for someone who both buys in bulk and knows the exact mood a mackerel gives off when it's just barely too fresh. You here to poach our suppliers? One jokes, "Just window shopping," you reply. "Unless Neptune blesses me with a barrel of unicorn tuna." They laugh. Someone tosses you a slice of dried mullet as tribute. You chew thoughtfully and drift toward the docks, where the harbor is abuzz with gossip. 2 ships docked from Cyprus, a galley grounded near Ostia, and someone's cousin's friend swears he saw a dolphin stealing oysters. Historians still argue whether dolphins were truly trained by Roman fishermen to assist with catches. There's some evidence for it, but it's hard to separate fact from overly romantic sea stories. Speaking of romance, on your walk home, you pass a young couple sharing a loaf, drizzled in something suspiciously familiar. You linger just long enough to hear, "Are you sure this is fish sauce?" "I think it's that one from the merchant near the baths. You know, the fancy one." You keep walking. Back at the shop, the crew has rearranged everything. Cassian is now labeling jars with a complicated numbering system based on mood and humidity. Lucilla's painted a mural of you triumphantly wrestling a tuna. Claudia has planted herbs in half of your storage jars, claiming the basil has agreed to the smell. You blink. Who approved this? You did, Claudia says brightly. In your dream, you let it go. Instead, you settle into the workbench and begin drafting someone new. A sauce that balances warmth and sharpness, that speaks of citrus groves and harbor winds, that doesn't try to be impressive, just comforting, like a letter to an old friend. Lucilla plops down beside you, handing over a shell-shaped dish of almonds soaked in honey vinegar. For inspiration, she says. You nibble, and an idea clicks. The next few hours disappear. You're measuring with your nose, stirring until your fingers prune, adjusting ratios by memory and instinct. At one point, you actually hum. You don't even notice the sun dipping below the rooftops until Cassian lights the lamp and says, "We've had 4 customers come in just to smell the place." You look around. The shop, glowing soft and golden, smells like spice and memory. That night, you bottle the new sauce and mark the jar with a small wax emblem, a fish wrapped in a wreath. Lucila's idea. Then, almost ceremonially, you place it on a top shelf, not for sale, not yet, just there, waiting. You're not chasing prestige anymore. You've earned your guild recognition, your naval contracts, your weird poem from the brothel. You've got more orders than time, more respect than you ever imagined. Now it's about flavor and ritual and the quiet joy of knowing you turned a smell most people run from into something they seek out, something they dip their bread in, share at feasts, whisper about in markets. As you close up shop, Cassian asks, "So what's next?" You glance at the jar. "Sleep," you say. "And maybe cinnamon," he groans. "We'll need a new spice license." "Good," you reply. "Let's make it complicated." You turn out the lamp, the jars settle in their racks, and outside the city hums with a soft, fishy pride. The last few weeks have slipped by like a drizzle of oil over hot flatbread. Quiet, fragrant, and strangely satisfying. Your days begin before dawn, not because you must, but because you like the silence before the clatter. The soft splash of brine, the whisper of wind nudging the shutters, the faint squeak of Lucilla's brush as she adds a crown of parsley to a mural of Poseidon holding a dipping bowl. The fish sauce enterprise runs like a seasoned crew now. Cassian has transformed from reluctant accountant to full-blown logistics tyrant, complete with his own filing system and a personally endorsed wax seal in the shape of a smug sardine. He's even invented an inventory chant the apprentices use during morning jar counting. Claudia's expanded her interests. She's now experimenting with bottling the essence of seasonal herbs alongside your garum, her latest. A blend with fig leaves and coriander. Tastes like a sunset on a barge. And Lucilla? She's somehow gotten your brand painted on the side of a baker's delivery wagon. There you are, holding a ladle like a gladiator, surrounded by olive branches and the phrase, "Fish sauce fit for Olympus," scrawled in confident, slightly uneven lettering. Historians still debate how widespread branding was in the ancient world. Beyond maker's marks and amphora stamps, did traders really care about image? Judging by your new orders from upper-class villas requesting the heroic garum from the mural, it would seem, yes. Yes, they did. Meanwhile, you find yourself mentoring more young tradesfolk, curious minds eager to learn the fine art of balancing fermentation and flair. You teach them patience. You teach them how to taste by listening to their tongue. And yes, you make them stir the vats with respect. One even calls you Magister Saporum, master of flavors. You almost correct him, but then remember you once paid rent by trading dried squid skins. So you nod, only if you clean the floors. You still visit the fish market. You still sniff the mackerel, you still mumble curses when an amphora cracks, but now there's less worry, less hustle, more space between breaths, and one day, standing in the doorway of your shop with a half-eaten olive in hand, you look out and realize your little business is now part of the street's rhythm. Children skip past humming Lucilla's jingle. A senator's slave pops in for a jar of the green label stuff. A local playwright offers to name a character after you. An ambitious sauce wizard who seduces a goddess. You politely decline. You've become part of Rome's daily taste, not a sensation, not a fad, a flavor, and it lingers. That evening, the crew insists on a small celebration. Claudia's baked fish cakes. Cassian's organized a scroll of praise from customers, including an oddly moving poem from the fig guy. And Lucilla unveils a new mural titled victory over the bland. It features you wrestling a salt shaker. As the laughter softens and the wine drains and the oil lamps flicker down, you glance around the room. You see a shop full of jars, each one a quiet chorus of time, care, and absolutely unapologetic anchovy. You see your people bickering and laughing and eating. And you see something else. Not success, not status, just warmth. A life built fishbone by fishbone. And now, as the last of the lamps go dim and the soft, briny hush of night wraps itself around you, you ease into your bed, or perhaps just into the calm hum of your thoughts. You've walked the markets, stirred the vats, laughed with friends, navigated Roman bureaucracy with only mild sarcasm and a fish-stained tunic. You've built a world out of the ordinary, turned fish scraps into gold and daily routine into something nearly sacred. There's peace in that, a rhythm, a kind of quiet triumph that doesn't need parades or statues. Just the soft clink of jars settling on shelves and the satisfaction of a job well done. Out beyond your window, the city settles too. The last carts roll home. The cats curl up on warm stones, and somewhere, someone dips their bread into a sauce you made and hums contentedly. Let that be your lullaby tonight. Let the slow swirl of ancient flavors, warm sunlight, and sea-salted memories rock you gently towards sleep. No more stirring, no more counting. Just the soft exhale of a quiet street, the warmth of a simple meal, and the stillness earned from a day, no, a life well lived. Sleep well, little merchant. Tomorrow the sauce can wait.